Welcome to TradingTheNBA.com. This is John's reports for the 27th of December. Well, we've been in that mode ever since we got above that 46.13 and then above the ABM yellow, straight back up and right back to the highs. So it's all congruent and very positive for a breakout setup. If it does, should get us pretty close to the 48. We've got strong magenta rising over yellow. So from that standpoint, all good. A little bit of a drawback here with the cyan moving above green. That could be a little bit of short activation, which is not bad because at this particular stage, short activation near highs usually forces the cover going past that. Now we can see that from the holiday breakout session, we had that extreme histogram moving into the yellow level, the extreme there at the 109. Could see some fill back into that. Would not be out of the question at all. From a Dow standpoint, similar readings. So from a consistency standpoint that we look for, everything congruent as far as even the NASDAQ here looking pretty strong from that standpoint. And green DOC still above the cyan. So it's all positive from that standpoint, as well as rising shakeout. It did produce a positive extreme for that previous day, so we would expect that on weakness, that's where you're going to fill back to around that 16,150 range. Gold starting its rise back now. This is going to be all relative to what they see for economic numbers coming through and whether the slowdown will cause the Fed to balk on its idea of tightening, which it really isn't doing, which it just says it's doing, but it's not, and that's why you're going to continue to see inflation. Probably most likely see oil rising as well. That assumes we don't end up with any world conflicts or setups like that. Bitcoin was nice on the turnaround, moving back over the 50K level, and not quite at equity highs, but pretty darn close. Wouldn't take a bit of trade more to break into new levels. And that's just on a relatively 50-50 basis from that, but the winners so far outpace any losers that makes that a significantly promising setup. And we'll be passing out the readings for that. In fact, I might just want to go over it while we're here. The easiest way to do that is to go to Studies, Edit Your Strategies, and then we just go to the Power T, we customize it, and baseline setup for 10 contracts and turning on the short trades, and these are some of the adjusted readings. And you go through pause and make sure yours match these setups. These are slightly different than the ES setup, which are the defaults, so worth noting. And then you can make those adjustments accordingly, and that will yield you the exact same configurations that we see on my chart. I may have a bit more time. This, you can see from that status report, this full year range from 1213 to 1227. So just a fraction over 1 year. But starting at the 13th, you're not going to get your first trade until right about in here. So it's equivalently exactly a year. In fact, it is a year 9 days, but it may take a certain number of days before the readings have promulgated enough to get us something satisfactory to work off of. ETH versus the dollar right there, we can see it's been very clean from an algo standpoint and a very tradable aspect. The fact that it's back above the 4K critical for it, below there becomes a little bit more dangerous. Still well below its peak earlier, just as Bitcoin is as well, and normal in those. It typically gets those retraces. In fact, had quite a few retraces given the year. Some of them quite steep, and if you didn't know where to take advantage of those, it was problematic for you. From our ES standpoint, that 50K capturing right after that brief turnaround setup right there, and that one's doing quite nicely. Take a look at the performance report on that. Always good to prepare for the new year. So from a long standpoint, excellent win rate, just under 53%. That still puts well over positive status. Very close to equity highs, potentially at the close of the trade that currently is. Should put us pretty close there currently. That trade is plus 112 at this particular stage. And it's going to be consistent regardless of the number of contracts, so it's just relative to the number of zeros you add to that configuration. And from a 5K standpoint, you can see that we started off green moving forward, and it just was pretty boring from most of the time. Literally just putting in a series of positive extremes. Mark the critical ones right there, 4702, 4691. Then we ended up with a couple of little stragglers in between that got filled pretty quickly, going through right up at the peaks, and was the last breakout right before we ended up with the sell signal, and that filled in partway back to him, so there still needs to be some more backfill within that, so we'll see how strong the setup is. Currently pretty bullish at this particular stage. We ended up with this strong white MBI by itself, and that did fill right back to the zero. When it's that far alone, it usually does go back to that. You're just looking at that point when you see that kind of spacing for that magenta to cross back above the white, and usually you're pretty good as long as you get blue over the gray, and clean going from there. As always though, I will continue to update things on the Skype chat. Trade well, and you can look for New Year's indicators for the start of the month. Trade well.